The crystal chandeliers of Le Jardin cast a soft, golden glow over the assembled guests. Linen tablecloths, polished silver, and the low hum of celebratory conversation filled the air. At the head of the long table, my daughter, Sophia, beamed, her medical school graduation cap perched precariously on her chestnut curls, a twin to my own. This was her day, the culmination of a decade of relentless work and sacrifice. My husband, of 30 years, Robert Blackwood, stood, tapping his champagne flute with a manicured nail. The gentle ting, ting, ting quieted the room. 50 faces, friends and family we'd collected over a lifetime, turned towards him, expectant, ready for the proud father's toast. I smiled up at him, my hand resting on Sophia's. I was the picture of the supportive wife, Eleanor Blackwood, aged 56, dressed in a simple but elegant navy sheath dress. I had perfected this role. Robert cleared his throat, his smile broad, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'd seen that particular glint before, a mix of nervous excitement and supreme self-satisfaction. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our brilliant Sophia," he began, his voice the smooth, confident baritone that had charmed boardrooms and dinner parties for decades. "We are so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. A doctor. It's astonishing." He paused, letting the proud applause wash over him. Sophia squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening. "Life," Robert continued, his tone shifting, becoming more theatrical, "is a series of chapters. And today, as we close this magnificent chapter of Sophia's education, I find myself ready to turn the page on my own." A slight ripple of confusion went through the room. This wasn't the standard toast script. "For too long," he said, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, deliberately avoiding me, "I have lived a life of quiet compromise. I have played a part that no longer fits. The truth is a weight, and I can no longer carry it." My smile remained fixed. Sophia's hand tightened on mine. "So," Robert announced, puffing out his chest slightly, the way he did when he was about to say something he considered profoundly brave, "I've decided to start a new life. Without you, Eleanor." The words didn't so much hang in the air as they crashed into it, shattering the elegant atmosphere like a brick through a Tiffany window. The clicking of silverware ceased mid-bite. A half-spoken sentence from my brother died on his lips. 50 pairs of eyes, wide with shock and morbid curiosity, darted from Robert's triumphant face to mine, waiting. They were braced for the tears, the choked sob, the crumpling of a woman publicly discarded. Instead, I let my smile widen into something genuine. "Congratulations on your honesty, Robert." I saw the first flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. This wasn't the script he had written. I was supposed to be the devastated victim, cementing his narrative of liberation. With a practiced calm that belied the furious, triumphant drumming of my heart, I reached into my handbag, a beautiful leather clutch Sophia had given me for my last birthday. I pulled out a thick, cream-colored sealed envelope and placed it gently on the tablecloth beside his untouched plate of seared scallops. "What's this?" he asked, his triumphant expression faltering, replaced with confusion. "Something for you to read later," I replied, my voice steady and clear, carrying in the dead silence. I turned to Sophia, whose face had gone as pale as the linen. I cupped her cheek. "I am so immeasurably proud of you, my love. This day is and will always be about your magnificent accomplishment." Then I stood, smoothed my dress, and addressed our stunned, silent audience. "Please, enjoy your meals. The sea bass is particularly good. I wish you all a lovely afternoon." With that, I walked away from the table. My head held high. I could feel the weight of every single gaze following my progress through the restaurant. The heavy oak door of Le Jardin swung shut behind me, immediately cutting off the wave of anxious, excited murmurs that erupted in my wake. Outside, the humid Boston spring air hit me, thick and heavy, but I welcomed it. I drew a deep, cleansing breath. For the first time in years, it felt like I was breathing freely. Behind me, the door burst open and slammed shut. "Eleanor! Eleanor, what the hell is this?" Robert's voice was no longer confident. It was high-pitched, frantic. I kept walking towards the parking valet, allowing myself a small, private smile. The envelope I'd handed him contained not a plea, not a negotiation, but the first carefully laid stone on the path of my revenge, a path I had been meticulously designing and paving for the last 11 months. My name is Eleanor Vance Blackwood. I am 56 years old, and until approximately 3 minutes ago, I had been the flawless leading lady in the production of Robert Blackwood's life. I had put my own career as a promising architectural designer on permanent hold to support Robert through business school, then through the launch and the subsequent sale of his first tech startup, then through the volatile early years of his second, more successful venture, Aether Innovations. I had run our household with quiet efficiency, hosted his clients, soothed his ego, and raised our extraordinary daughter, Sophia. I was the one who had quietly sold inherited jewelry to cover his first company's payroll when he had forgotten to set aside tax money. I was the one who had taken on freelance drafting jobs during the lean years while he preached the gospel of disruption at expensive conferences. My own dream of starting a firm focused on sustainable, accessible housing had been perpetually shelved. "After we get through this launch," he'd say. "Once Sophia is off to college," he'd promise.
Sophia was now a doctor, and Robert was leaving. But he was doing it on his terms, in his time, for maximum dramatic effect. What he had failed to consider was that the quiet, supportive woman he took for granted had been the structural engineer holding his entire world together. And I understood load-bearing walls. I knew exactly which one to remove to make it all come crashing down. The first crack appeared nearly a year ago. I was reconciling the statements for our joint accounts, a task Robert had happily relinquished to me decades prior. I noticed a series of small, recurring transfers to an account listed only as RW Holdings LLC. The name meant nothing to me. It wasn't one of our investments. When I'd asked Robert about it over dinner, he'd waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that's just a new shell company for Ether. Tax purposes. Don't worry your pretty head about it, Ellie." I had worried. Not my pretty head, but my sharp, analytical mind. The mind he'd always patronized. Having managed every dollar that came into our marriage, I knew the rhythm of our finances intimately. This was a discordant note. Instead of confronting him, I got curious. Intuition, that low hum I'd spent years silencing, was now a screaming alarm. I began a quiet investigation. What I discovered was a meticulously constructed web of deception far more elaborate than a simple affair. RW Holdings wasn't for Ether. It was Robert's personal slush fund. Over 14 months, he had systematically funneled over $400,000 of our joint money into it. A deeper dive revealed credit card statements for an account I didn't recognize. A black Amex, with charges for lavish dinners at restaurants I'd never been taken to, hotel stays in Napa, and purchases from jewelers and boutique clothing stores that were decidedly not my style. Then came the pièce de résistance. Buried in a forgotten email folder he'd once given me the password to for a vacation booking years ago, I found property listings. Emails between Robert and a realtor in Bar Harbor, Maine, discussing offers on a stunning, modern cliffside house. Our dream. the house we'd talked about retiring to for 20 years. He was buying it, but not with me. The final irrefutable proof came when he left his iPad synced to his messages on the kitchen counter. There they were. Messages to a woman named Chloe Dubois, a 34-year-old wellness influencer and life coach he'd met at a seminar, his junior by 22 years. The messages were nauseating. They spoke of their new life together, of how he was finally breaking free from the gilded cage of our marriage, of how he'd earned his happiness. They detailed his plan. Wait until after Sophia's graduation. I won't let Ellie ruin that for her, he'd written, the hypocrisy stealing my breath. And then make his grand exit. He would move into the Bar Harbor house with Chloe, using the RW Holdings money to fund their fresh start, leaving me with the remains of our picked-over joint accounts and the Boston brownstone he apparently now found stifling. What Robert had forgotten, or perhaps never truly appreciated, was my background. Before I was Eleanor the supportive wife, I was Eleanor Vance, who graduated top of her class at MIT. I understood structures, systems, and crucially, forensic accounting. I knew how to follow a money trail until it led to a snake's nest. And I remembered the prenuptial agreement. We had signed it 30 years ago, much to my father's dismay. Robert, then an ambitious man with nothing but debt and a big idea, had insisted. He said he wanted to protect his future earnings, so no one could ever accuse him of marrying me for my family's modest wealth. The irony was so thick you could build a wall with it. That agreement, which he doubtless forgotten existed, contained a meticulously crafted fidelity clause, a clause that, if triggered, would award the wronged party, me, 70% of all marital assets, the primary residence, and would void any claims he had to my family's trust, which he'd always assumed was far larger than it was. While Robert was plotting his escape with Chloe, I was building my case. I hired the most ruthless divorce attorney in Boston, a woman named Miriam Sharp, whose reputation preceded her. I documented every hidden transfer, every secret credit card charge, every email, every property listing. I had a forensic accountant trace the RW Holdings money. I had a private investigator document his movements, confirming what the paper trail already showed. I timed everything perfectly. I knew Robert's vanity and his desire to maintain the image of the good father would force him to wait until after Sophia's graduation. What he didn't know was that Miriam had filed the divorce papers that very morning, citing infidelity and financial fraud. The papers were already in the court system, a time bomb set to his public announcement. The envelope I handed him was a copy of the filing, a summary of the financial evidence, and a highlighted copy of the prenuptial agreement with Section 7B, the fidelity clause circled in bold red ink. I didn't return to the restaurant. I drove to our home, a beautiful 4-story brownstone in Beacon Hill that we had painstakingly restored together. The house he had already promised to Chloe, according to a text message I'd photographed. The brownstone will fetch a fortune. We'll be free of it by fall, my love. I parked and walked calmly into the home that had been our shared sanctuary for 20 years. Everything looked the same. The framed blueprints of famous buildings we loved, the grand staircase we'd stripped and refinished ourselves, the worn Persian rug in the study where we'd spent countless evenings reading. Yet everything was different. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. In the back of his walk-in closet, hidden behind a rack of bespoke suits, were 2 large suitcases packed and ready. He was planning to leave tomorrow. I smiled at his predictability. He was always meticulous about his appearance and utterly careless with everything that truly mattered. My phone buzzed incessantly. Messages from friends at the restaurant, from my brother, from Robert's mother. I responded only to Sophia. "I'm okay, my darling. This is not your burden to carry. Please try to enjoy the rest of your day with your friends. We will talk tonight. I love you more than you can possibly know." I had shielded her from this for months, not wanting to taint her final grueling rotations at the hospital. She would be hurt that I hadn't confided in her, but she was pragmatic. She would understand. Eventually. 3 hours later, I heard the familiar purr of his Mercedes pulling into the cobblestone drive. The front door was thrown open with such force it rattled the pictures on the wall. "Eleanor!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the high-ceilinged foyer. "Where are you? We need to talk." I was sitting in his favorite leather armchair in the study, calmly reviewing architectural plans for my new office space on my laptop. I closed it as he stormed in. His face was flushed with anger and confusion, the cream-colored envelope crumpled in his fist. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, waving the papers like a white flag of war. "You served me with divorce papers today, of all days?" "I thought it aligned rather nicely with your own plans. You wanted to start a new life. I'm simply helping to facilitate the transition." "You had no right," he sputtered. "I had every right," I interrupted, my tone even, "just as you had every right to choose Chloe. We all make our choices, Robert." "The prenup," he said, his voice suddenly smug. A pathetic attempt to regain control. "It expired years ago. Any lawyer will tell you that. It's null and void." I allowed myself a small, cold smile. Actually, it didn't. Section 12, subsection C, specifically states that the fidelity and financial disclosure clauses remain in full effect in perpetuity throughout the duration of the marriage and any subsequent legal proceedings pertaining to its dissolution. "Your lawyer really should have explained that to you." "Oh, wait," I paused. "You didn't consult one before you started secretly moving $500,000 of our marital assets, did you?" The color drained from his face as the reality of his own arrogance sank in. The document he had insisted upon to protect his potential wealth would now cost him everything. The brownstone, the Bar Harbor property, which I noted with satisfaction, he'd put a down payment on using commingled funds, his share of the investment portfolios, a significant portion of his stake in Aether Innovations. His grand, dramatic gesture at the restaurant had just become the most expensive public announcement of his life. "You can't do this to me," he said, his voice cracking as he collapsed onto the sofa opposite me. We built this life together, and you chose to end it, though not quite in the way you had planned." His phone buzzed persistently in his pocket. He glanced at it, then ignored it. Chloe, no doubt, wondering where he was and why he wasn't following their meticulously orchestrated script. "You've always been clever, Eleanor, but this is cold," he said, trying a different tack, his voice softening. "What about our history, 30 years together? Does that mean nothing?" I studied him, the man I had loved for 3 decades, the man who'd held my hand through the terrifying, joyful chaos of Sophia's birth, the man who danced with me in this very study on our 10th anniversary when a storm had knocked out the power. When had he become this stranger? Or had he always been this man, and I, in my devotion, had simply refused to see it? "Our history meant everything to me," I answered truthfully. "That's why your betrayal cuts so deeply." His expression softened momentarily, seeing what he thought was an opening. "Then maybe we can fix this. I made a mistake. People make mistakes, Ellie." "This wasn't a mistake, Robert," I said, my voice hardening. "A mistake is leaving the milk out. This was a calculated, year-long campaign of financial deception and personal betrayal.
You moved our money. You looked at property with her. You planned to publicly humiliate me to make your escape easier. There's no fixing that." His face hardened again. "You're being dramatic. You're exaggerating." "Am I?" I picked up my phone from the side table, opened a recording app, and pressed play. His own voice filled the room, slightly tinny but unmistakable. "After the graduation, I'll tell her. A public setting is better. She's too concerned with appearances to make a scene in front of everyone." Then a younger, higher-pitched woman's voice, Chloe. "And she has no idea about the money?" Robert's voice again, dripping with condescension. "None. Eleanor trusts me completely. It's her greatest weakness." The blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly gray. "You recorded me? That's illegal." "Not in Massachusetts," I replied coolly. "It's a one-party consent state. And it's certainly not illegal when the recording is made in your own home. I didn't record your private moments with Chloe, Robert. I'm not cruel. Just the conversations about your plans to defraud me." Robert stood up suddenly, agitated. "I need to make some calls." "Of course," I said, standing as well. "Your attorney might be a good start. I'll be staying at your sister's house tonight." "Margaret's?" he sputtered. "My sister's house?" I nodded. "She's quite upset with you, actually. She was the one who first spotted you and Chloe together at that charity gala last fall. She didn't tell me immediately. She confronted you first. You promised her it was nothing, a meaningless flirtation you would end. When she realized you hadn't, she came to me." This was another blow he hadn't anticipated. Margaret and I had always been close, but Robert never imagined his own sister would choose my side. "Everyone's betraying me," he muttered, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Ironic, isn't it?" I gathered my purse and the small overnight bag I had packed earlier and placed by the door. "You have until tomorrow evening to remove your things from the house. After that, the locks will be changed." As I headed toward the door, Robert called after me, desperation finally cracking his voice. "What about Sophia? Have you thought about how this is going to affect her? You're tearing our family apart." I paused, a cold, sharp anger finally breaking through my calm facade. I turned to face him. "Don't you dare use our daughter as a human shield, Robert. You certainly weren't thinking about her when you were planning your new life on a Maine cliffside with your girlfriend." His phone buzzed again. This time he looked at it and groaned. "Problem?" I asked, my hand on the doorknob. "Chloe," he said, looking utterly lost. "She's at the apartment. She's already moving her things in." I couldn't help but smile. "The apartment on Commonwealth Avenue, the one you put the lease in both your names? The one you signed for last month?" Robert nodded, looking confused. "You might want to check with the leasing office. That application was flagged for significant credit issues and was never finalized. The agent called the home phone to verify information. I handled it myself." I walked out, closing the door softly on the crumbling ruins of his perfectly planned new life. Margaret lived in a cozy, book-filled Victorian in Cambridge, not far from the university where she taught art history. She greeted me at the door with a fierce hug and a glass of very expensive Pinot Noir. "I just got off the phone with Sophia," she said, pulling me inside. "Are you all right?"
"I'm better than I expected to be," I admitted, following her into the warm, cluttered kitchen. "I feel clean." "I never thought he'd be such a monumental idiot," Margaret fumed, refilling her own glass. "A public spectacle? At Le Jardin? He's completely lost his mind." "It was a power play," I explained, sinking into a kitchen chair. "A public rejection, so I couldn't fight back without looking like a hysterical woman. He wanted to control the narrative. He always did have a flair for the dramatic," she said bitterly. "But this is beyond anything I expected. What was in that envelope that made him chase after you like a scalded cat?" I explained the contents: the divorce filing, the financial evidence, and the prenup. "The prenup," Margaret mused, a slow smile spreading across her face. I remember when he insisted on it. He was so proud of himself, so convinced he was the savvy businessman protecting his future empire.
The irony is absolutely exquisite. My phone rang. Sophia. I took a deep breath before answering. "Mom," she said immediately, her voice strained. "I'm coming over to Aunt Margaret's." "Honey, you don't have to." "I'm already in an Uber. He's telling people you've had a nervous breakdown, that you've been secretly planning this for years to take him for everything he's worth. He's saying horrible things." Of course he was. Robert's first instinct was always to rewrite history, to cast himself as the victim of a vast, unwarranted conspiracy. "Let him talk, Sophia," I said calmly. "The truth has a way of coming out. His version will look very foolish, very soon." 20 minutes later, Sophia arrived, still in her graduation dress, her makeup smudged from crying. She fell into my arms just as she had when she was a little girl, seeking comfort after a nightmare. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I didn't want to poison your final semester. You were working 100-hour weeks, Sophia. You needed to focus." She pulled back, wiping her eyes with the heels of her hands. "Well, Dad took care of poisoning it anyway." We moved to Margaret's living room, and I finally gave my daughter the full, unvarnished story. The hidden transfers, the secret credit card, the emails about the Bar Harbor house, Chloe, the prenup, the recording. "I knew something was off," Sophia admitted, pulling a crocheted blanket over her legs. "He was always distracted, always on his phone, taking business calls at weird hours. But I never imagined this." She looked at me, her eyes full of a new kind of respect. "You played the long game, Mom." "I protected what was ours," I corrected gently, "what we built as a family." My phone buzzed with a text from Miriam Sharp. "Emergency motion granted. All accounts you identified are frozen pending discovery. RW Holdings included. He's locked out." I showed the message to Margaret and Sophia. "Good," Sophia said, her voice firming with a resolute I recognized as my own. "He deserves it." My daughter's immediate loyalty was a balm, but I was pragmatic. He's still your father. Your relationship with him is separate from all of this. I will never ask you to choose sides. Sophia shook her head, her jaw set. "Maybe someday, but right now, I can't even look at him. He hugged me this morning, told me he was my greatest achievement, all while planning to detonate a bomb under our family." Hours later, as we were picking at a takeout curry Margaret had ordered, the doorbell rang. Margaret went to answer it, returning a moment later with a deeply troubled expression. "It's Robert, and he's not alone." I steeled myself. Margaret led Robert and a young woman into the living room. Chloe Dubois looked profoundly uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to another, her eyes darting around the book-lined room as if looking for an escape route. She was pretty in a carefully curated way, with long, honey-blonde hair and the kind of unearned confidence that comes from a life largely untouched by real consequence. Robert, by contrast, looked furious. His earlier desperation had calcified into pure, unadulterated anger. "Eleanor, you need to stop this insanity," he demanded, not even bothering with a greeting. "Unfreeze the accounts, now. We can discuss this like reasonable adults." Sophia stood up, placing herself slightly in front of my chair. "Maybe you should have tried being a reasonable adult before you decided to humiliate Mom in front of everyone we know." Robert's eyes widened, as if just noticing her. "Sophia, this doesn't involve you." "Doesn't involve me?" she echoed, her voice laced with incredulous anger. "You blew up our family on my graduation day, and it doesn't involve me?" Chloe touched Robert's arm. "Rob, maybe we should go. This isn't the time." He shook her off. "No, I'm not leaving until she agrees to be rational about this." Margaret folded her arms. "It seems to me that my sister-in-law is the only rational person in this scenario. You're the one who created this mess, Robert." I remained seated, a spectator in my own drama. For 30 years, I had been the director, the stage manager, the set designer, ensuring the show of Robert Blackwood's life ran smoothly. Now, I was just watching the lead actor flail without his crew. The accounts will remain frozen until the preliminary hearing. That's in 72 hours. The judge will determine appropriate asset division at that time. 72 hours? Robert sputtered. What am I supposed to do for 72 hours? You have your personal account, the HW Holdings one, the one you've been funneling our money into for over a year. There should be plenty to cover a hotel room. Chloe's head whipped toward Robert. You have a separate account? With how much in it? An interesting fissure was emerging. Clearly, Robert's financial transparency with his new partner was as lacking as it had been with his old one. Robert ignored her. This is vindictive, Eleanor. This isn't you. Perhaps you never really knew me, just as I apparently never really knew you. Sophia turned her gaze to Chloe. Her voice was cold, clinical, the way I imagined she spoke to difficult patients. Did you know he was going to do it like that at my graduation? Chloe had the decency to look ashamed. She glanced at Robert, then back at Sophia. I thought he was going to talk to your mother privately. The public announcement today was unexpected. Robert shot her a look of pure betrayal. The cracks in their united front were widening into chasms. I think you both should leave. You've upset my niece enough for one day. Sophia, Robert pleaded, switching tactics, his voice taking on a wheedling tone he used to use when she was a teenager and he wanted something. You have to understand. Relationships change. People grow apart. My daughter's face hardened into an expression I had never seen before. What I understand is that you're a coward who couldn't even give Mom the dignity of a private conversation. What I understand is that you were stealing from our family while you were telling me that money was too tight to help me with a down payment on an apartment. You said we had to be responsible. Robert paled. That's not how it was, sweetheart. It's exactly how it was. Sophia cut him off, her voice trembling with rage. Please leave, Dad. I can't look at you right now. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Robert turned on his heel and strode out. Chloe scurried after him like a chastised puppy. At the door, he paused and looked back at me, his eyes blazing with impotent fury. This isn't over, Eleanor. I'll fight you on this. I'll fight you with everything I have. I met his gaze steadily, my own voice quiet and final. You're welcome to try.
After they left, Sophia collapsed next to me on the sofa, the anger draining out of her, replaced by exhaustion and grief. I've never talked to Dad like that, she whispered. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. Sometimes, standing up for what's right feels like being cruel. You were magnificent. Margaret brought us fresh glasses of wine. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. This ending was, indeed, just the beginning. The preliminary hearing was a swift, clinical affair. I arrived with Miriam Sharp, a formidable woman in a razor-sharp black suit. Robert was represented by a flustered-looking young man from a corporate litigation firm, another poor, rushed choice. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a steely gaze, reviewed the evidence with terrifying efficiency. This prenuptial agreement is clear, unambiguous, and legally binding, she stated, peering over her glasses at Robert's lawyer. Do you contest its validity? Your Honor, given the length of the marriage, we believe the terms may be— The terms are what they are, the judge interrupted. The evidence of systematic, undisclosed fund transfers is compelling and appears to be a clear violation of the financial transparency clauses herein. She shuffled through Miriam's exhibits. I am ruling to maintain the freeze on all joint and business accounts, pending full discovery. Mr. Blackwood will retain access to his personal RW Holdings account. The primary residence remains with Mrs. Blackwood. Given the evidence supporting the infidelity clause, these rulings will stand until the full hearing in 30 days. Robert's face was a thundercloud. "This is a travesty," he muttered, too loud. The judge fixed him with a glacial stare. "Mr. Blackwood, the only travesty here is your own lack of foresight. I suggest you familiarize yourself with the documents you sign. This court is adjourned." As we left the courtroom, Robert rushed after me. "Eleanor, for God's sake, be reasonable. 30 years. It has to count for something." "It counted for everything," I replied, not breaking my stride, "until you decided it was disposable." The news spread through our social circle like wildfire. The phone calls were endless. I maintained a dignified silence, saying only, "Robert and I are separating. It's a private matter." Meanwhile, Robert's version that I was a vengeful, calculating woman who had orchestrated his downfall began to crumble as the truth leaked out. Mutual friends, once sympathetic to his midlife crisis, cooled considerably upon learning about the stolen money and the planned humiliation. The financial freeze was catastrophic for his carefully constructed illusion. The Bar Harbor deal fell through when he couldn't access the funds for the next payment. The luxury car he'd promised Chloe vanished. His image as the successful tech mogul was in tatters. 2 weeks after the hearing, Margaret called me, her voice bubbling with glee. "Have you heard? The girlfriend is gone." "Already?" I wasn't surprised, but the speed was impressive. Apparently, she did some digging of her own, discovered that RW Holdings was mostly emptied by legal fees, and that his stake in Aether was leveraged to the hilt. She told a friend she didn't sign up to be with a man who was faking it. She's already been spotted with a venture capitalist from New York. I laughed. It was a genuine hearty laugh. He was always better at the performance than the production. Meanwhile, I was moving forward, using my separate savings, money Robert had never paid much attention to. I leased a bright, airy studio space in the South End. I finally launched Vance Designs, my firm focused on sustainable and accessible housing. My first clients were 2 women, recently widowed, who needed help redesigning their homes for a new chapter in their lives. Word spread quickly. I wasn't just an architect, I was someone who understood transition. Sophia, who had taken a residency at Mass General, called me regularly. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," she told me, after I had secured my 3rd major project. "You're not just building houses, you're rebuilding lives." "I'm just doing what I should have done years ago," I replied. It was empowering to be needed for my mind and my talent, not just my ability to manage a household or soothe an ego. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for what would have been our 31st anniversary. Robert arrived looking diminished, older. His business was floundering without my behind-the-scenes financial management, and his reputation was in ruins. The judge upheld the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. Robert was left with his struggling company, his depleted personal account, and a small apartment in a less fashionable part of town. I kept the Brownstown, my business, my retirement accounts, and the majority of our investments. The justice was, indeed, poetic. The weapon he had forged to protect himself had been turned against him by the very person he'd never thought to guard against. As we left the courtroom for the last time, he approached me. The anger was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out exhaustion. "I made a terrible mistake," he said, his voice quiet. "Yes, you did. Is there any chance we could ever—" "No," I said, my voice gentle but absolute. He nodded, finally, truly understanding. "I hope you find happiness, Eleanor. You deserve it." It was the first entirely honest thing he'd said to me in years. 6 months later, Vance Designs was thriving. I had hired 2 junior architects and was negotiating on a plot of land for my first ground-up development, a small community of affordable net-zero homes for single mothers. Sophia visited often, her pride in me a tangible thing. "You know what's ironic?" she said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine in my new office, overlooking the city lights. "If Dad had just been honest, if he had just asked for a divorce like a normal person, he probably would have kept half of everything. His pride cost him everything. Some people are so busy building a facade, they forget to build a foundation." The woman who had once defined herself as Robert's wife and Sophia's mother was gone. In her place was Eleanor Vance, architect, business owner, and advocate. The envelope I handed Robert at the restaurant hadn't just been a weapon of revenge. It had been an invitation to a life I had only ever dreamed of. In securing my financial future, I had reclaimed something infinitely more valuable: myself. And my story was just beginning.